Hi, I'm Brian Grant. I'm a principal engineer at Google, and I'm here today with Aparna Sinha, a product manager on Kubernetes and Google Container Engine, and Brandon Phillips, CTO of CoreOS. And I'm going to talk to you about how and why we built the Kubernetes community, which is one of the things that really sets Kubernetes apart from the other container orchestration projects and products that are out there. So application containers, you've been hearing a lot about the conference. They're an increasingly popular way to accelerate application development and deployment. But containers alone often aren't sufficient for managing containers in production at scale. You need a container orchestration system like Kubernetes. I like to think of Kubernetes as a container-centric infrastructure for managing and deploying applications. Kubernetes was created by Google, drawing on experience with Borg, the system that runs search and Gmail. But Kubernetes was designed to run anywhere. I previously worked on Borg and have been involved with Kubernetes since its inception. We open sourced Kubernetes in 2014 and created the Cloud Native Computing Foundation to host the Kubernetes project and also to foster an ecosystem of cloud native infrastructure. As you can see from this graph of commits over time, Kubernetes has been growing very fast. We've sustained a steady pace of growth in the original Kubernetes repository, which is what this graph shows, now with more than 43,000 commits. But changes to this original repository account for fewer than half of all changes to the project. So it really is growing very fast. It's been estimated that over 400 years of work have been put into Kubernetes in just the last 3 years. This growth has been fueled by growth of contributors. We started with fewer than a dozen, and now we have around 150 active monthly contributors to the project and over 1,500 all-time unique contributors. We have contributors in most time zones, including countries like Brazil, India, China, and all over the world. In fact, anywhere you go, you're likely to find an active Kubernetes contributor community. So where has all this growth come from? Google has been increasing its investment in Kubernetes over the past few years. We've been doubling in size every year, but the community has grown even faster. So in the first year, Google accounted for about 3/4 of all the changes to Kubernetes. Now we're responsible for less than half. We worked actually really hard to onboard all these new contributors onto the project, and Google engineers spend a substantial fraction of their time helping other contributors on the project onboard and be successful. So we put all this work into growing the community because we found that engagement with the community yields numerous benefits. Engagements with users helps those users be successful with the project, and it also provides rapid feedback that drives improvements to Kubernetes. And both the improvements and the direct help to users create advocates for the project who blog and tweet about it, who present at meetups and grow awareness of the project, which then attracts more users. And more users and more usage also attracts developers. And the developers build tools and other projects that help make Kubernetes easier to use. Things like package managers, chatbots, platform as a service, functions as a service, event-driven automation. I have about a document 6 pages long with just a list of interesting projects built on Kubernetes. And we see that this empowerment to improve the project increases their commitment and spurs innovation of even more projects based on Kubernetes. These users and developers that additionally attract vendors who try to fill the remaining gaps in the ecosystem. And we help these vendors integrate with Kubernetes, and that enables Kubernetes in more environments and for more users. So all of this creates this virtuous cycle that has made Kubernetes one of the most popular projects on GitHub with over 20,000 GitHub stars. But we like to say Kubernetes isn't just open source, it's an open community. The open community encourages not only direct contributions, but also sharing of best practices, examples, tools. And we find that not only vendors and developers are contributing, but also our users. For example, a co-founder of Box, who's using Kubernetes in production on-premise, actually wrote the initial version of the Kubernetes command line tool. right? And people may contribute for personal or corporate recognition, or they may contribute to Kubernetes to make it better suit their needs just because it's cheaper than building their own solution from scratch. Or they may do it for the greater good because making Kubernetes better makes it better for everyone and benefits everyone, not just Google. In fact, our community is often cited by users who talk about their experience as one of the main reasons they chose Kubernetes over the alternatives. People say that they want to be part of a community where other members of the community give back to the community as well. But there are costs and risks associated with having such an open community. It's not all the positives, so I did want to cover the challenges. First, it's extremely time-consuming. We have a lot of interaction with users, developers, vendors, everybody in lots of different forms, Twitter, Slack, GitHub, email lists, meetups, conferences, interviews. So that engagement provides all the benefits I just talked about, but it is very time-consuming. And it's not just a 9-to-5 job. A lot of people contribute to Kubernetes in the evenings, on the weekend. They do it for fun, not part of their day job. And like I said before, they do it in time zones all over the world. We found that while GitHub is really good for building a community of open source contributors, it makes it really challenging to manage large projects with large teams and many different moving pieces. Decision making, while it can lead to better decisions because you get a diverse set of inputs, it also does slow down decision making to some degree. So you have to be aware of that. And finally, effort's not allocated on the project like it would be if it were just executed by a single company. A single company can control how much work to put into features versus code quality, for example, or documentation. And with people contributing under their own objectives and not under your direct control, steering people to meet all the needs of the project is challenging. So now I'm going to hand off to Aparna, who's going to talk to you about some of the processes of how the project actually works.
Thank you, Brian. So Brian mentioned some of our challenges, and we are actively working on challenges, and they are always upcoming. We're only 3 years old as far as open source projects goes. Kubernetes is still kind of a toddler. There are certain things, though, that we have learned in our 3 years of reasonably well success as far as number of contributors and number of contributions. Here are the principles that we've learned. The number one principle is that of inclusion. And by inclusion, we mean that we are a welcoming community, and we value and respect diversity of opinion. This is easier said than done. We have a lot of very senior engineers on this project, a lot of them from Google and from other companies, and it can be difficult to disagree. It can be difficult to be open-minded and include other opinions and reconcile those, especially when there is time pressure. We have a release cadence where we release every 3 months, and there is time pressure to make those decisions. So in those circumstances, we've actually found it's even more important to be inclusive and to be respectful, and we've got a code of conduct around that. And we actually benefit, particularly Google, benefits from this principle of inclusion because it takes us outside of our sandbox and our limited view and gives us a much better view of the full set of users, both within Google and then outside of Google, that will be using this as a platform. So that's the number one principle, is inclusion. Another aspect of inclusion is that we have this process called, or this construct, organizational construct, called special interest groups. When a project gets to be large, like Kubernetes, it is important to push the decision-making down to the actual people who are building the features. And that's what the SIGs allow us to do. Each of the SIGs is a combination of people from different companies and different organizations that have gotten together because they're interested in a particular topic, a particular technical topic, and they want to move the needle in Kubernetes on that topic. These are two examples. There's a SIG called Cluster Lifecycle SIG, and their main task there is to make sure that Kubernetes is easy to install and deploy in a variety of different environments. This is a hard problem. Kubernetes has become very popular and is fundamentally a portable cluster orchestrator. That means that you can deploy it on bare metal, you can deploy it on any of the various public clouds, all of which have sort of slightly different networking, slightly different load balancing, and slightly different storage. So it needs to be able to be installed easily on a variety of different environments. In fact, last year we got some feedback from our users that, Kubernetes is becoming hard to install and hard to use, and that day one experience isn't very good. SIG Cluster Lifecycle, which you see some of the companies that are involved in it, Weaveworks, CoreOS, Heptio, obviously Google and others. SIG Cluster Lifecycle kicked into high gear, and within one release, they came out with a much simpler two-command install experience, a command line experience that is labeled kubeadm. And then, over the last 2 quarters, they've built out a roadmap that is resonating much more with users. What they're doing is they're taking some of the building blocks from kubeadm and making them reusable across all the different methods of installation, bringing consistency and ease of use across different environments. This type of hard problem, it's hard for one company to solve it because you don't necessarily have a view across the different platforms. But when multiple interested parties get together, they have a better view of the problem and a better shot at solving this type of issue. Another example is SIG Service Catalog. This is also a collaboration between different companies. They got together and they worked on a common standard for service-to-service communication, as well as for services to be consumed in Kubernetes. They borrowed and worked collaboratively with Cloud Foundry, which is another open source project, and brought the two projects closer together. Jointly, we're working to establish the Open Services Broker API. And this was announced, I think, earlier this year. That's a great example of skating to where the puck is. This SIG is enabling service management in a way that will be used at scale in the future. Those are just 2 examples. We have over 25 special interest groups, and you can see some of the areas that the community is particularly passionate about. And each of these is an active group. And these SIGs are always evolving. So it's kind of like different stars, they're colliding and collapsing, and the new ones are being born as the interest and the problems of our users change. That's a very good sign, that's a very healthy sign of the community. One of the challenges when you have this type of distributed leadership and distributed decision making, while that helps you scale, it is difficult to keep them all informed and coordinated. And so that's one of our challenges in Kubernetes is how do we make sure that the SIGs are aware of what the other SIGs are doing. This comes to a head when we do a release. So we've had cases where, one SIG developed a feature and another SIG wasn't aware of what was going on, and then after the release we found that there was a bug that then we needed to do a patch on. So this is what brings me to our second principle, which is that of transparency. Transparency is extremely important in a project of this size. What that means to us is that we really overtrain on being open with everything that we do. Especially all of our technical content there's only really one place for it, which is GitHub issues and GitHub proposals. It's all developed in the open, the designs are, the problems are. There's a lot of back and forth between the engineers and between different companies on GitHub. By some measure, Kubernetes is one of the most talkative communities. I think the measure is actually number of comments per issue. We have a lot of comments on every issue. So that makes it great in terms of transparency. Also, all of our discussions and meetings are recorded and available to the public. But the community is not the only one who benefits from this. Actually, at the end of the day, the users benefit the most. And I think that's one of the attractions of Kubernetes and of open source projects in general that have this level of transparency, is that what you see is what you get. So the code that's in the open and the discussions that are in the open, that's exactly what you get. There isn't a lot of marketing, there isn't a lot of positioning, and users actually really appreciate that. So with the emphasis on transparency comes a large volume of information. As I mentioned, we are a very comment and discussion-oriented community, so it's difficult to actually manage that information overflow. And Brian alluded to this, it's a 24/7, global kind of job for everyone who's involved. Some of the constructs that we have for organizing this are these meetings. We have a weekly community meeting. Sarah Novotny, who was in the keynote this morning, she leads that meeting, and she kicks it off with by welcoming everybody, and then there's a demo. So every meeting, there's a demo where the latest and greatest feature, from one of the community members gets demoed, and others have a chance to give feedback. But it's also really exciting because usually in these community meetings, which are, by the way, open to the public, you are all welcome to come to these, you'll see the latest in innovation. And that's really exciting, actually. After that, each of the SIGs give an update. And that's one of the ways that we ensure this SIG-to-SIG communication so that we don't have those kinds of issues where one SIG developed a feature and the other SIG didn't know about it. Each of the SIGs give an update about what they're working on for the release. And then if there are dependencies that are discussed, those can be taken offline and the SIGs can work together. It's not perfect, but it's better than, it's better, and we're evolving every day. Then we also have the burn down meetings. The burn down meetings are release specific. So we are right now just about to put out the 1.6 release. We will have burn down meetings. These are, again, cross-company, across the community, and we will discuss every single issue in the burn down meeting for that release. We don't generally hold the release. We have, as I mentioned, a 3-month cadence, and having that process actually takes a lot of stress out of the whole process, having that release cadence of 3 months. So we don't hold the release. If an issue doesn't make it this week, then it'll make it in the next 12 weeks. The only thing that we hold it for is if there's a quality issue. And then the last piece here is the roadmap process. And the community meetings, burn down meetings are great, but how do you get a view of what the project is trying to achieve on a longer range? The roadmap process is also a work in progress. This is something that I've been responsible for along with others in the community. The heart of this process is what we have called the features repository. It's a repository where it essentially serves as our publicly open backlog for the project. Again, anyone here can go to the features repo and you can see what are the features that are coming in the next release. And you can see their status as they evolve. Obviously, not everything makes it, and things change during the course of the release, but it's extremely open. You can go there and you can see it. And that provides visibility, of course, internally to the team as well, to the different SIGs, because they can see what each SIG is working on and how that impacts. We have a feature freeze, so what can go into the repo? It shouldn't always be evolving, obviously, because there has to be some predictability. So 2 weeks into the 12-week release, we freeze the features repo. Anyone can go ahead and make a recommendation of what should be in the features repo. They have to go to their respective SIG and make sure that that feature has a design proposal that has been reviewed by the lead engineers in the SIG, and the SIG overall has agreed to work on it. But then 2 weeks into the release, that repo is frozen. The repo then also drives the release notes and the documentation for the release. Often in open source projects, and certainly in ours, documentation has been a major challenge, getting the docs to reflect what has actually been developed in a way that is consumable by users, given the breadth of the project and the intensity of the technical teams working on it, can be difficult. But having a central repository allows us to at least plan for that and also gate features if they aren't well documented. Lastly, we have we've just started doing kind of annual and semi-annual planning. This is where we get the community together, all the different SIGs. We get them together in kind of an unconference to talk about the state of the project and what we want to do with it in the coming year. So we had a meeting in December to talk about 2017 and what Kubernetes should aim for in 2017. And there were 3 kind of top-level things that came out of that. One is that we have to work to scale the project, and so making contribution easier, making changes to improve our velocity to scale the project. That's one of our top priorities, as an example. Number 2, we want to make it easier for people to customize and add objects to our API without having to restart and reboot Kubernetes. So that's another thing. API federation is one, and associated features is another track for this for the whole of 2017. And then the third, related to extensibility, is ensuring conformance. Kubernetes has become quite popular. There are many distributions. I think Brian recently counted there are 30 or so distributions. What is important to users, and one of the value propositions of Kubernetes, is that it is interoperable and portable between these environments. In order to ensure that interoperability, we're working on a set of conformance tests so that each of these distributions is conformant, at least at a base layer. So those are our 3 themes for 2017. There are others, but having this type of unconference on a semi-annual basis allows us to get together and plan. So transparency, inclusion, and some of these processes are good and they're working for us, but they would not mean anything if we didn't have the principle of ownership. Ownership in Kubernetes has a very specific meaning, which is, first of all, we encourage everyone in the community to take responsibility and own a role. There are many roles. You can see some of them here. You can be a contributor, you can lead a SIG, you can be part of the product management group. There are many roles in the release process that you can take. So there are engineering and non-engineering roles in the project. But what ownership means is not just that we encourage people to take these roles, but that we also respect that role. And so people have a chance to take on roles that they don't formally have. They haven't necessarily tried. We have engineers that do product management and product managers that do release management and so on and so forth. Respect for the owner means that others in the community will step back and allow the person that is taking that role and owns that role to really define the community's answer for that particular responsibility. And that allows us to grow people into these different areas. Speaking of growth, one of our challenges and something that we're working actively on is growing people through the contributor ladder. We want to have a lot more of our users, and many of our users actually want to become contributors. We want to make it easy for them to join as contributors and then move up the ladder as they become more facile and more well-known in the Kubernetes community to become reviewers, approvers, and ultimately a very select group of folks that are, in the owner's file. This is the contribution path. People in the community are rewarded for their ownership and the responsibilities that they take, often in the form of sort of homemade awards, but also blog mentions and PR mentions. The release team is often a critical one, and they are ones that get a lot of gratitude from the community. Also, Kubernetes has become well enough known that people who take on these roles and move up through these ladders put that on their resume, and that is a qualification that follows them from company to company as they go on in their career. As we mentioned, we don't know everything, and we especially don't know, of the challenges that will come as we scale this project further. So we have several learning mechanisms. We do retrospectives after every release to talk about what went well and what didn't go well. These retrospectives are unique in that it's not a small group of, within my company, the people that I know, but this is a open public retrospective with people from many companies. And so it's very common in Kubernetes to get feedback from someone over, a chat or over the Slack channel, and to take that very, very seriously, and for that type of feedback to actually be, career enhancing. So that was about our community and how it functions in the processes. This is a bit of user feedback. And what we found is that the users, while they like the technology, Kubernetes is, got a lot of, heritage from the different companies that have been contributing to it in terms of the technology itself. But really, I think the users have been telling us that they value the transparency, they value the what you see is what you get and the openness, and they value the community. They like the fact that they can contribute and they can influence and they can work with all of the different companies that are involved. We recently did a survey. Actually, this survey is still in progress. This is some early feedback where I wanted to understand, so is this, open source software, how well accepted and how important it is to companies, that are large in size, enterprise companies. And as you can see here, more than 50% of enterprises say that open source software is either very important or moderately important to them. So why is that? And these are some of the benefits that they say are important. Number one, the ability to customize it, and that's particularly true with Kubernetes because if you want to install it on premise, you can add and modify, adjust almost all of the components. The scheduler, the monitoring solution, the networking solution, pretty much all parts of it are adaptable and can be changed and adjusted. The other one, which I think is very interesting, is the lower barrier to entry. Obviously, it's free, and many of our ultimate customers start out trying it, and so by the time they actually use a commercial version, and any of the many commercial versions, they already have experience. They have tried it out, and they've decided that this is really what they want to do, and they've become sometimes contributors and members of the community already, which makes it easier to work together. And then I think the last two, or the second two after this, faster rate of innovation and the elimination of lock-in that comes with proprietary software. Those are also extremely important. I think the faster rate of innovation is something that if you join our community or if you're already members of the community, you will see that. It's actually, I would say, arguably faster than the innovation that takes place inside any of the member companies. As example of user contributions, this is just a sampling of some of the user talks that are coming up. So we have our annual conference for Kubernetes, biannual conference for Kubernetes, coming up in 2 weeks in Berlin. And these are a sampling of some of the user talks. One of the things that users tell us they enjoy most is not talking to Google or CoreOS or Red Hat or any of the vendors, but talking to other users. About how do they do the deployment. And this is some of the currently trending areas of interest. So how do you deploy Kubernetes in a private cloud, on-prem environment with legacy load balancers? How do you use PostgreSQL in a clustered HA setup with Kubernetes? And Zalando will be talking about how they're doing that using stateful sets. Our users are using TensorFlow on top of Kubernetes with GPUs, on different types of clouds. This is actually information that's very helpful from a product and planning perspective because, I can see what the users are interested in. We can focus our roadmap on meeting their needs. And some of the other, CI/CD migration, that's a very common one. Many of our users have sort of reference architectures that they have developed for that, and they share with each other. We also see a lot of migration from a variety of different PaaS to Kubernetes. So that was a little bit about our users. And I mentioned that, as a Google product manager, I have a view of what our users are doing on Google. But by being a member of the community, I can get a much better view of the whole elephant and what our users are doing in other clouds and what they are looking for on-premise. That's where I partner with some of the members of our community, and I'm going to invite Brandon Phillips, who's the CTO of CoreOS. CoreOS has been one of the first companies to join the Kubernetes community, and they bring a perspective from both on-premise and multi-cloud and hybrid users that I'd like you to hear.
Cool. Thank you for the introduction. So what I wanted to talk about was our involvement inside of the Kubernetes project and some of the customers that we've been working with and what we've been seeing in the community and sort of our strategy in interacting with the Kubernetes community overall. So just for a little background, CoreOS started in 2013. Ironically, back then we had thought that one of the biggest risks that we would have starting the company was that the market wouldn't understand containers. I think that risk has been mitigated with all the excitement over the last few years. But what we're really trying to do is two things. One is that we're trying to, as a big overarching theme, we like to say that we're trying to secure the internet, and that's like the long-term mission of the company. Now, the tactic that we take is that we try to take best practices that have been seen in a lot of these internet giants, what we used to call GIFI, or Google's infrastructure for everybody else, and bring these technologies and help companies and organizations be successful with them. So that's what we do at CoreOS. And so we kind of started our journey, particularly around Kubernetes, before even Kubernetes came out. We had a project that we had introduced called Fleet into the market. We started this in late 2013. And we were trying to fill this white space. Containers were great, but they were stuck on single hosts. And so we built this clustering system. And it was built on a bunch of different technologies, used by a bunch of different organizations. And it was going pretty well. And then unbeknownst to us, there was a great set of people inside of Google working on Kubernetes. And so this project was introduced a few months, about 6 to 8 months after we started Fleet. And so pretty rapidly, we saw that Kubernetes filled in a lot of the gaps that we were planning to build out in Fleet. And so we decided to join up with the Kubernetes community. And we've been deeply involved pretty much ever since the beginning of the project. And the reason that I think Kubernetes got such a huge start initially was that it was really informed by a lot of Google's experience running these sorts of systems in production. All right, so what is kind of our journey that we take with customers on a regular basis? Oftentimes, customers are not going to start, particularly people who are just thinking about their cloud transition, just learning and understanding containers. They're not going to start by just biting off Kubernetes from the very beginning. So what we do is we help a lot of different organizations think about what is their cloud strategy, start thinking about containers and how that influences and changes the way their organization works together, bring these things together in different environments with some of our products, and then moving them through the transition towards Kubernetes and the Kubernetes product that we have called Tectonic. And so it really is not just a technology choice for a lot of these organizations, but it's also a choice of making changes about how they approach software development, and also how they approach rolling out and managing this infrastructure. So in particular, what we do with our products is we like to say that they're self-driving, which really is just this continuous process of delivering the latest in open source technology into customers' environments, getting feedback from those customers on what's working well, what isn't working well, having our engineering teams directly involved inside of the communities to ensure that those projects are representing what they actually need, and then continuing that cycle release after release. What we like to say is that we deliver pure upstream Kubernetes to our customers, but we do it in a particular way that enables them to actually digest and get a hold of that value. So in order to have this cycle where we aren't waiting for months or years before delivering an open source project to an enterprise, we obviously need to be deeply involved in the release process to ensure that the open source projects are delivering something that can be used sort of right off the shelf without modifications by these large organizations. And so one of the things that has evolved inside of Kubernetes is our involvement in the release process, but also a really rigorous release process that is adopted by the entire community. So one of the, I think, really unique things about Kubernetes as a open source project is it's taken a very practiced and pragmatic approach to release management. So inside of Kubernetes, we essentially at any given time have 3 releases going on. We have the latest release, the latest minor release is what we call it, which right now is 1.5. We have then 2 releases that we continue to maintain with security fixes and bug fixes. And these are available to users of our product Tectonic, available to users of Google's GKE, et cetera. But what this means is that customers are given 9 to 12 months of time period from when they adopt something to it continuing to get security updates to it essentially to eventually it becoming end of life. So they have a very long confidence window of a particular release being something that can rely on for a long period of time. And then obviously throughout that entire process, these are minor release bumps and we ensure that the upgrade paths are well tested and well understood. So kind of give you a sense of what these minor releases look like, Aparna touched on this a little bit. We're currently in the middle of a release cycle. A Kubernetes 1.6 is the next release that will be coming out. And so we essentially run through this calendar where we spend about 4 or 6 weeks coding, depending on the release. We go through a number of alphas, we go through and do a beta, we start code freezes, and then we finally release the project. And we do this about every quarter, every 3 months or so. And meanwhile, as security vulnerabilities come out, as bug fixes are needed, we are making these backport and cherry pick releases into the 1.5, 1.4, and 1.3 branches. So one of the things about open source software and good software practices in general is that it's not an individual member that makes a release successful. It takes a big team. And inside of Kubernetes, there's a lot of people involved, from product managers to documentation people to people doing triage of incoming bugs. And then at the very top is a person who's overall responsible for the release, the release manager. And their goal is to, 1, make sure the entire team is filled in, and then 2, that the release actually happens on time. So one of the things that's happened in this release, the 1.6 release that I'm really happy about, is that CoreOS has gotten involved and is one of our engineers, Dan Gillespie, is the release manager for this release in 1.6, which is pretty cool because this is the continuing effort of the community to make all the responsibilities of the project kind of across different organizations that are involved. So this will be the first release where the release manager isn't a Google employee, and I think this is an important milestone for the project. So another piece of releasing is testing. Now, we have this diagram of Kubernetes that we used earlier. There's a lot of moving parts inside of Kubernetes, as this diagram would lead you to believe. And what we do is really, really sophisticated set of testing. If you haven't taken a look at the Kubernetes dashboards at any point, a lot of it allows you to drill down across a lot of different metrics, across different cloud providers, across different deployment types, et cetera, and drill down and see, is the code actually healthy? Is it operating as it should? One of my favorite dashboards that Kubernetes has is of individual nodes, where we're able to drill down and see how much memory is being consumed, how much CPU is being consumed across the tests. Another big change that we've had in the last few months is that we've made the security release process something that is ran by the community. So security releases are pretty important to any open source software, and it's really easy to make these things sort of an ad hoc process. Security vulnerabilities come out every couple of months, no matter how good your engineering practices are. And so for a lot of projects, they just kind of deal with them as they come. But one of the things the Kubernetes community has done well is that we identify a problem, we try to create a process to fix that problem reliably time and time again, and delegate responsibilities of getting that thing fixed. And so the security release process allows the community to go through, handle disclosures quickly, figure out a communication plan with the users, communicate that plan, and actually give them actionable data. We'll be running through this process every time that somebody discloses an issue, whether it ends up being an actual security impacting issue or not. And at the end, we try to make a retrospective of, hey, did this security process actually work? What can we do better next time, et cetera. This is a quote that in the SRE, the Site Reliability Engineering book, there's this idea of blameless retrospectives, and this is one that I really like. The cost of failure is education. And this is really about, like, if our security process doesn't go well, or our release process doesn't go well, all we can do is reflect on what didn't go well, get together as a team, and actually improve the process for the next time around. Cool. So a big reason that I think Kubernetes has gotten extremely popular, and one of the things that we're directly involved in, is making Kubernetes successful wherever people have compute, network, and storage. And we've done this in a variety of ways. Really the dream for people of cloud portability is that you're able to build an application for the cloud, and then you're able to run it in your existing data center. For a lot of people, they have a data center footprint of some sort. You're able to run it on your individual developers' machines, so they're able to have a local dev test environment. You're able to deploy it into a public cloud environment, and maybe run it on a second cloud environment, which we're finding is a very common pattern for a lot of people, and maybe a third cloud environment. And so as an example of this, we have a customer, Ticketmaster, that we've worked with. I was surprised when we started working with Ticketmaster. I didn't realize they're a 40-year-old technology company. But as a 40-year-old technology company, they have a lot of challenges. They have a lot of virtual machine footprint. They have about 22,000 virtual machines that they manage on their own data centers that they've purchased all the hardware for. They have a lot of different products. They have a lot of different engineers, et cetera. But what they deal with every day is what they call their self-inflicted DDoS as a service, which is, when a new concert ticket comes out, maybe Beyonce's announced a new tour, they essentially have this one moment in time where they get a ton of traffic. And obviously, they would like to move a lot of this traffic and a lot of this responsibility onto a public cloud. And so with Kubernetes, we're helping them to deploy Kubernetes both in their data center and to move some of their workload to the public cloud. And that's all enabled because of the abstractions and because of the technology of Kubernetes. And so in order to get them there, in order to get a lot of these companies there, what we do is that we fill in a lot of the white spaces for where Kubernetes is not able to adapt to any environment. So some of the things that we've introduced over time are things like Dex, which is an identity provider that allows people to plug into their existing Active Directory or LDAP services, or other things like Flannel, where we're able to bring the Kubernetes opinion and model of networking across any public cloud or into people's data centers with ease without a lot of work with their network operations team. And that kind of goes across a lot of what we do in the open source. We work closely with Kubernetes. We fill in white spaces where Kubernetes isn't able to go where we need it to go. And we continue to iterate and make sure that it is successful as a multi-cloud platform. So what Kubernetes is at the end of the day is really, I think, a way of expressing a consumption of compute, network, and storage that can be used and abstracted across any sort of infrastructure. And that means that whether you're using Google Cloud or any of the other public clouds or even bare metal, Kubernetes should reliably work in the exact same way across those systems. And it's our responsibility as members of the Kubernetes communities and companies helping to make these users successful that we build the technology in such a way that this is actually true and that we can bring this idea to fruition. So I just wanted to end with a quick recap about kind of the journey that we've gone through with Kubernetes and really what it's trying to tackle. Kubernetes is this container-centric infrastructure and software that's designed to help people kind of use some of the best practices that have evolved from Google and other people over the years. It's a system that's designed to run anywhere, whether you're in your cloud provider, on your laptop, or in your bare metal environments. it is a huge active community. We have people from all over the globe, like Aparna said, participating, and those people aren't just necessarily engineers. We have very talented product managers and documentation experts who are making the project not just a fun, open source science experiment, but an interesting and useful product that people can actually take off the shelf and use in their infrastructure today. And with all these data points that we've discussed, it's actively in use by large organizations today. I think it's really easy as software engineers to get excited about how cool a technology is, but really the value of technology doesn't come out until you have somebody who is actively using it and giving you that feedback. And I'm really happy to say that Kubernetes is doing that on a very regular basis with a growing number of organizations using it. And of course, it's a lot of fun as well. This community is a super dynamic community. People are excited about the way that we're developing software. They're excited about working with each other across different organizations. And I think that is an important part of building any sort of community. With a little bit of branding and a good group of people and some good processes, you can build something awesome. And we're doing that at Kubernetes. So with this, I'd like to invite you to join all of us working on Kubernetes at github.com/Kubernetes. There you can find the code, but also importantly, information on how to find us all. So the mailing lists, the community hangouts, all the details that you might need to get involved. And if you ever have any questions, there's a lot of friendly people that will answer you either on our Slack or mailing lists. No question will be rejected. So please join us. And with that, I thank you for your attention. Thanks.